Final examination is fast approaching. I still need to review for the skeletal system of the frog. The skeletal system. The skeleton is a hard framework of an animal for supporting the tissues and protecting the vital organs of the body. It also provides attachments for the muscles used in movement and locomotion. Vertebrate skeleton is both external and internal, and unlike that of invertebrates, is always under the surface, where it constitutes a living growing tissue. Skeleton may be an external skeleton called exoskeleton, which is derived from the skin, forming a covering and protective layer on the outside of the body, while endoskeleton provides support and framework for the body, protects vital organs of the body such as the brain, spinal cord, heart, lungs, place of attachment of voluntary muscles, and provides the site for the manufacture of red blood cells. 1. There are two original components of the vertebrate skeleton. First, the axial skeleton, which is skeletal structures forming the main axis of the body or trunk. Next is the appendicular skeleton, skeletal structures supporting the appendages, girdles, and limbs. Axial skeleton. This is an example of an isolated vertebra, the atlas. Atlas, the first modified cervical vertebra. Frog is necklace having only one cervical vertebra. Its parts are the neural spine, the neural arc, the posagapophysis, the concavity for articulation with occipital condyle, and the centrum. Trunk vertebrae. It includes the second to the eighth typical vertebrae. These vertebrae exhibit all the major parts of a typical vertebra. All trunk vertebrae are provided with lateral projections called diapophyses or transverse processes. The parts of the typical vertebra are neural spine, posagapophysis, transverse process, presagapophysis, neural canal, and the centrum. The sacral vertebra. The sacral vertebra is the ninth vertebra with enlarged transverse process. This vertebra braces the hind limbs and pelvic girdle against the vertebral column. The parts of this vertebra is the transverse process, prominence of centrum, neural canal, and presagapophysis. The urostyle. Urostyle is the 10th atypical vertebra. It is the longest and most posterior vertebra. Like the atlas, it is not provided with transverse processes. That is why both are called atypical vertebrae, lacking some major parts of a typical vertebra. The urostyle parts are the neural canal, foramen for the exit of the 10th spinal nerve, the keel, the centrum, and the concavities for articulation with sacral vertebra. An example of a pharyngeal skeleton. Pharyngeal or visceral skeleton is that part of the endoskeleton which supports the gills and furnishes attachment for the respiratory muscles. It is a part of the cranial skeleton that develops in the visceral arches. The hyoid apparatus. Skull. The skull is an axle in the skeleton found inside the head where it encloses and protects the brain. It is most complex of all endoskeletal structures, chiefly because of its origin and development. It serves as the skeletal framework of the vertebral head. In the dorsal view, the parts of the skeleton are premaxillae, maxilla, nasal, sphenoethmoid, frontoparietal, median dorsal suture, icicator orbit, occipital, foramen magnum, exoccipital, protic, quadratojugal, and squamosal. In the ventral view, the parts are premaxillae, premaxillary teeth, maxilla, maxillary teeth, vomer, vomerine teeth, palatine, parasphenoid, icicator orbit, foramen magnum, exoccipital condyle, quadratojugal, and pterygoid. Appendicular skeleton. Appendicular skeleton provides support to the appendages, girdles, and limbs. Its components include the pectoral and pelvic girdles and the bones of the limbs, which are forelimbs and hind limbs. The pectoral girdle supports the anterior paired appendages, while the pelvic girdle supports the posterior paired appendages. This is the pectoral girdle. Its parts are episternum, scapula, suprascapula, clavicle, glenoid fossa, episternum, fenestra, and the ciphisternum. Pelvic girdle. Pelvic girdle is an appendicular skeleton which serves to brace the posterior appendages. It differs from pectoral girdle in the absence of dermal components. The parts of this structure are the ilium, the pubis, pubis symphysis, acetabulum, the ischiac, and the ischiac symphysis. Bones of the forelimbs. The anterior appendages called forelimbs articulate with the pectoral girdle, which however is rarely directly joined to the vertebral column. This is the forelimb, the lateral view. Its parts are the head of femur, the deltoid or ridge, the humerus, the radioulna, the carpals, the metacarpals, and the phalanges. Bones of the hind limbs. The posterior appendages, called hind limbs, similarly articulate with the pelvic girdle and transmit their support to this girdle. The parts of the hind limb in ventral view are head of femur, the femur, tibiofibula, calcaneum or fibulare, astragalus or tibiale, ordinary tarsals, calcar, metatarsals, and the phalanges. The vertebral column and ribs. Vertebral column or backbone is the main axis of the vertebrate skeleton. It is composed of a longitudinal series of similar bones called vertebrae. Its parts are the anterior concavities, transverse process, neural spine, posygapophysis. The second to eighth vertebrae are called typical vertebrae, the sacral vertebra, the urostyle.